Hi, everyone. My name is Bob. I am that real alcoholic, and it's so good to be here today. And Roberta, you make me blush. I don't blush easily. Um, thank you for the introduction, if you want to call it that. I don't know if I can live up to that, but I'll do the best I can. Because I have completed this work with the help of God and a sponsor, and I do practice these principles to the best of my ability on a regular daily basis. And it's really nice to be here today. It really is, and nice the reading, And I need to begin by saying I've had the Big Book for a long time, and prior to Big Book Step Study, I never read the doctor's opinion because all my Big Book meetings I went to, we all started off with the first chapter, chapter one, page one, and so. When I started to read this, it was very refreshing. But I'd like to begin also just by giving you a little idea of that I am a real alcoholic. And one thing that stands out for me in the reading tonight is that he says that he didn't remember this guy, but from a trembling, despairing, nervous wreck had emerged a man brimming over with self-confidence and contentment. That's me. I mean, I don't know about self-confidence, self-reliance, and contentment, but I can remember being trembling, despairing, nervous wreck at the end of my drinking. I can remember certain episodes when I was riding into work on the MBTA, the Orange Line, and in the wintertime with the heavy coat on and sweating bullets, and then kind of looking around and wondering if anyone's looking at me, and this is where alcohol had taken me. That this was close to the bottom that I had. And I began drinking. I grew up in, I'm Irish Catholic from Boston, and I like to always kind of include that in the beginning because give people an idea where I'm coming from when it comes to God. But, and there was always drinking around at the time. And I picked up my first drink at 13 years old. And because of situations, causes and conditions, as they say in the fourth step, if I hadn't picked up that drink at 13, I would have taken my life because I had just a lot of fears, doubts, and insecurities at that time, along with menopause or whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of stuff going on that I just didn't feel really good about myself. And growing up Catholic, I had this God in my misunderstanding. It wasn't a friendly God. It was a God that, you either behave or you're going to go to hell. And as teenagers, we all were in one part of the church, our little corner, and he used to always glare at us over there. This is when the priests were up tall in the pulpit. The pulpit wasn't down here with us. He was up there, and he used to look at us when he would say things like that, and we'd be like, ooh, kind of teasing him a little bit back. And that was, I look back on it now and I said, boy, that was something else. But anyway, so I didn't have a good idea of God, never mind a relationship with God or it was, so, and I didn't know that I could go to him if I needed help. And I didn't know how to talk to my mother. She was a single parent with us. And, I was very, very sick and confused. But when I took that first drink, all of a sudden, I got that ease and comfort that I had been looking for the longest time. And I felt really good. And I said to myself, I can remember, oh, I want to feel like this the rest of my life. So this is this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to drink the rest of my life. Even though I grew up in a neighborhood where there was a lot of alcoholic parents, especially husbands, that we would see coming home drunk and falling up the stairs, and they'd get in the house and all hell would break loose, and all this stuff. I mean, I saw that, but I didn't think that would happen to me. I was going to be different, and as we know, alcohol has a different plan for us, but everything. Alcohol was with me for all the time. I mean, and the job that I got, I'm 19 years old, and started working with the city, and I'm in this survey crew for construction and stuff, and at lunchtime, which started at 11, we found this bar room. It was actually in my neighborhood, and we went in there, and everybody knew them, and I could get served, not a problem. And I said, "Oh, this is going to be good." So by 1 o'clock, 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock, we go outside and they say, "Okay, go home." And I said, "Boy, I'm going to like this job." But I see now that was a lot of enabling for me, and there was never anything back in the day to discourage drinking or smoking cigarettes or anything. If anything, there was everything encouraging us to smoke cigarettes and to drink alcohol. I mean, I saw this actor on TV, and he was sitting down, and he had a drink in one hand, a cigarette in the other, and he had two girls, one on each of his laps. And I was like, I want to be just like him, So I worked pretty hard at it too. And anyway, as time went on, and I ended up getting married young. My girlfriend at the time, she got pregnant, and so I'm doing the right thing, a good Irish Catholic and all too, and get married. And now I'm like, I'm like the man of my house now, And at the time, we could get these fake state liquor licenses, buy them for $5, throw a picture on it, get it laminated, and as long as we showed that to people in the bar room or package stores, we could get served. And I was, like 19, 20 years old, and I looked like I was 12 or 13 because I had the baby face. Not as cute as I am now, but I had the baby face back then. And so as time went on, I was starting to do some of the things that I saw other people doing with alcohol. Anyway, I want to make a long story short because I want to get into what the reading was all about too, because in here the doctor really explains what the problem is, and but unfortunately he doesn't really know how to give the solution, but he knows about what the solution is. He knows the mental, he knows the physical, and what he says that we need more than a synthetic knowledge. And what that for me means, it's more of a spiritual thing, and he knew, and even says later on at some point, he uses the word power greater than them in order for them to get sober. So he treated a lot of, from what I understand, and this isn't in a chapter, but, he treated maybe 50,000 alcoholics. And, he just never was successful with anybody. It must have been very discouraging for him seeing all these people and these lives being destroyed. Not only that, but, the families of them as well. And it was just so sad. And this is back in, the late 20s. Early 30s, before, Bill and Bob got together in 1935. And of course, also there was, prohibition was there, and the booze was flying all over the place everywhere. And, it was crazy time. And, his story is next. I don't want to get into his story, but it was very tough back in those days to have to deal with alcoholics, because this never, what the ultimate outcome is. So he explains that it's, even though that that we developed that phenomenon of craving, which is precipitated or prior to it's the allergy the phenomenon of craving. That gets the allergy going, and once we have that allergy, we have to have that drink, and maybe it's reversed with that one. But anyway, it was I couldn't understand why I couldn't stop drinking, or why I couldn't control my drinking, because I so much wanted not to drink because of what was going on in my life and how it was affecting my family. Um, I always thought that I would be able to find a way to control it, because right now, when I took that first drink, I became dependent upon alcohol, and then later on, I became alcoholic, which is a difference. Because depending upon it was one thing, because I had a level of control, but losing the power of choice and becoming alcoholic was an altogether different part of this disease. Because now I'm that pickle, okay? I can't become that cucumber again. And when I was coming around, I started coming around these halls in 1986, and the old timers used to say, "Once a pickle, always a pickle. You can't become that cucumber again." And I looked at them and I'm saying to myself, he's nuts. His brain must be all fogged from all the drinking he did, you know? But I understand what he means now. I can't, when you become an alcoholic, you become the pickle. What is a pickle? It's a pickled cucumber. So the cucumber got pickled, and I got pickled, and we all get pickled. And once we get pickled, there's nothing else we can do. So anyway, and there's a lot of other different ways that the old timers were making some suggestions that, like, you take that first drink and it gets you drunk. And I'm like, well, that's not true, because usually I'm right around 5 or 6 drinks, I'm starting to feel it and all too. So I didn't get the idea of that first drink. But that also, the first drink starts that allergy, which gets that phenomenon of craving, because now my body is telling me I want more, and my body and my mind is telling me probably a couple of different things, yes and no or whatever. And actually, by the time in my end, there was no fight at all left. I just did. And it was really so disappointing in myself that I wasn't able to do this, and that the times that I got drunk and had the blackouts and the problems with my family, and the difficulties and all this other stuff, I so much never wanted to be like that, because I saw it, and I wanted to be a good father, a good husband, an example and all that too. And the other funny part of it is too, that all the stuff that I did, I knew it wasn't me. That was the thing that was so confusing afterwards, is that it's not me doing this. So what is doing it? And my wife actually thought a couple of times that I didn't love her or anything else like that. And I said to her, I said, it's not that I don't, it's I can't. And she looked at me like, what the hell are you talking about? And I didn't know what I was talking about. I have an idea about it now, but I didn't know then. It was all I could say was I just can't. And so when I come into Alcoholics Anonymous, I really wanted to, get sober, and finally, I had to really put my recovery and my sobriety ahead of everything else, because I was also taught that too. Anything and everything you put in front of your sobriety, you will lose. And I kept trying to, because I lost my wife by this time too. She passed away from this disease. So I have 2 children, a son who was 14 and a daughter who was 10. And, I really wanted to be there to help, to be the father, to do what I needed to do what they needed me to do, and be the person they needed, and do it right. And I couldn't. And I even told them afterwards, I says, if I'm going to, I need to be at a lot of meetings. And they were okay with that, because Dad was crazy, crazy sober. And and then by the time, things settled down with me, it took a few years here and there. They were older, and it's like all of a sudden they were doing their own thing. And so it was sad that I lost that time with them. But then again, at 9 years sober, I was ready to pick up a drink, because I was suffering from the untreated alcoholism. And it's part of it's in this reading they talk about now, where a trembling, nervous wreck again, you know, because I was doing the step work and everything just kept stirring everything up, and I had no solution or no way to deal with it, what to do. So I remember hearing about these. Well, I was guided to these big book step study meetings by a gentleman who eventually became my sponsor. And I remember, coming into the first big book step study meeting. It was a men's meeting in Braintree, Massachusetts. And I almost didn't. I was talking to myself about going in there because I didn't want to, as I heard all these stories about these Nazi meetings, and they're not real AA and all this other stuff. And I was like, oh man, what are they going to do? They're going to brand my butt or something like that, or I was afraid what I was going to have to do. And I found that it was a lot different than what I had feared. Like most of my fears are just fear alone. But when I sat down, I saw this sign across the wall. It was on the wall, and it said "Celebrate a Miracle." So I knew I was in the right place. You know what I mean? By this time, 9 years sober, the God of my misunderstanding became a God that I needed to understand and could kind of give him a little credit for whatever it is and kind of let him in a little bit. So I got into the big book and got introduced to this, and they were talking about God, and that was difficult for me too. So signed, but for the grace of God, and figured out God, I was in trouble. But a lot of that changed once I got into doing the work in this process. But it all begins with what happens in this chapter here, with the doctor's opinion, and it talks about the different types of alcoholics, and also about classification of alcoholics. A lot of people you succumb to the phenomenon of craving instead of making the supreme sacrifice and continuing to fight. But the classification of alcoholics, and then it goes into the psychopaths, ever remorseful, and I can understand a little bit about that because of where my mind was with all of this. And I usually tell people when I got into Alcoholics Anonymous, I had 3 brain cells left and 2 were in a coma. So I wasn't doing very good. And so talk about, the manic depressive or the psycho kind of qualifies me for a psychopath, I guess, But I was at the point where it was either do something about it, to accept the spiritual help, or go off to the bitter end, and I'm glad that when I went through all this chapter with my sponsor, he was pointing out a number of different things, and he said, make sure you have a dictionary with you and look up these words that you don't know. And if you think you know it, look it up anyway, because he says, you'll try to fool yourself, and you don't want to do that. You want to know for sure. You got to know in order to know. So, because if you don't know, you don't know, and you need to know so that this thing will work. So a lot of it really, really helped me to understand why I was doing the things I did, and to convince me in a way that, to a point that I was, that I definitely had this. And the doctor says here that the only relief we have is suggested entire abstinence. And that scared me because all my life I was dependent upon alcohol. Alcohol was there. I had all these fears otherwise, and fears from my childhood and everything too. So the whole idea of an entire abstinence was not the easiest thing for me to do. But I knew it was time at that point because I'd been around now, and if I don't do this work, I'm definitely going to drink, and I'm definitely going to die. So I have to do this, and I did. And the doctor even says here that most chronic alcoholics are doomed. And see, that was the way they thought of it back then, in 1935 and before. They just threw you into this the abyss, if you want to call it, and you just faded away and died. And that's so sad. And today we don't have that. We have opportunities. We've saved millions of people. So it says, what is the solution? And the solution ends up being, um, you know, uh, finding some power greater than myself. And the doctor talks about that too. That it's something beyond his synthetic knowledge, and he even uses the word power greater than himself in this chapter in his writing. And you know, and I accepted the plan of action outlined in this book. And one thing I mentioned this the other night, I shared that, and back when I started to do this, back in the early '90s, they made us sit through a whole cycle of the readings before we even started. So I had to sit at 16 weeks of going through this whole book, Doctor's Opinion, to the end, before my sponsor would even start me in my writing and everything. And the reason we did that, and it's too bad we don't do it today, but is so that I know what I'm getting myself into and know how serious this is and how important it is. And at the men's meetings that I went to, I saw these guys. I mean, they were hard chargers. I mean, they example what what is the power behind this thing. And there's one meeting I went to on Friday nights in Somerville, Mass, and that's kind of like the North Shore, southern part of the North Shore. And a bunch of Italians were there, so I figured half of them were from the mafia or something. And and a lot of them eventually came up and gave me these big hugs, and I'd be like, ooh, don't. But they were showing me something. They were encouraging me. They were showing me the love. It's behind this program and all too. And I look back on it very fondly now. And I once in a while run into people on these meetings, or even I run into them sometimes out and about. But I think, and I'm probably over my 20 minutes or so, and I feel like I'm getting ready to kind of wind this up, because everything that's in this chapter, and I think it's so important that all of us read this and come to understand that whole doctor's opinion of it, and he does it in plain language. He doesn't do it in a way where it's not something we can understand. He does it in a way that he wants to contribute, to the rehabilitation of us alcoholics. And I'll tell you, his writing in here contributes quite a bit to people, because it's a nice way of beginning or getting us prepared for Bill's story, which comes next. And it's nice to sit down. When I sit down with some people I start to work with, and go through this with them, and go through each paragraph and all too, and they're rushing through things, and it's like, no, what's this mean, and that too, and unfortunately, the sitting through the cycle isn't something that we do that much anymore. And I had to, in some ways, reluctantly concede, because when I started to work with some people, and I told them that they had to wait, all this time, they found some other sponsor to work with, so I think it's still kind of bad, because, well, not so bad. I mean, it's worked, but I think it was a good preparation for what we had to do, in order to recover from this disease. And the last thing I'll say is, I never heard in open AA before I got to Big Book Step Study that we could recover. And I remember when I first went back to AA after this and called myself a recovered alcoholic, and the guy come up to me and says, "Aha, so you think you're recovered, huh? Well, let me take you to a bar and I'll buy you a couple of drinks. Let's see how recovered you are." And I looked at him and I said, "But that's not what it's about." See, that's the misconception. I think today, because Big Book Step Study has been around for a while, that people hear a little different story, which I think is helpful. So anyway, again, I want to thank you, Roberta, for inviting me to speak at this meeting tonight. And it's been a really honor and a privilege to share. And Eric, hopefully I'll see you up in Nefotz this weekend. And if you don't know what Nefotz is, well, maybe we'll explain it to you. We'll see. Anyway, thank you all for your time and listening. God bless.